What's good? This is your boy Tico Tren, and I'm going to talk about logic versus COVID for all intents and purposes here. Because the sad part about this is it gets a bit ridiculous and it gets a bit hinky once you start thinking about it or talking about it for all intents and purposes. It just gets a bit hinky when you actually start really trying to dissect the shit that goes on when it comes to this lovely thing, this epidemic or pandemic or pandemic or whatever you want to refer to it as. It seems to always evolve into some bullshit for all intents purposes, which actually kind of sort of makes me laugh most times. It's like, really, dude, this is what we're doing now. This is really what we're doing now. And what I mean by that is, for all intents purposes, a good example is I'm gonna just walk through the logic versus the actual shit because it doesn't even make sense to me, even as a medical professional who actually works with this shit and works in the field with this shit and tests this shit. Okay, so what you're trying to tell me? Because here's the problem that I'm having with the whole entire COVID virus thing. First off, if it's quote unquote worse than the flu, in all technicality, you should be at home in bed for 7 days. First off, seven or more for all intents and purposes. That being said, this is the problem that I'm actually having with the whole entire thing. One, let's like all the shit that they're coming up with to basically sounds like bullshit. My favorite one is alcohol is dangerous. Alcohol hires the ups the risk of you actually getting COVID virus. Okay, cool. We'll just say this is true. Okay, cool. You can be at a bar. You can only be at bars for a certain amount of time, and if you are at a bar, you gotta have food in front of you. Wait, so I can drink at a bar, even though COVID virus it ups my chance of getting COVID virus, and that's a bad thing. But I can eat as long as I have food in front of me. I can drink as much as I want at a bar for all intents and purposes. That makes sense. How? How? And this is the thing that blows my mind when it comes to this shit right here. It's like, really, dude, this is what we're doing now. This is really what we're doing now. Also, on the flip side to that is alcohol, can higher chances of getting the COVID virus, but the liquor store's still open. Right. Because that makes sense how? Especially because the sad part about the whole entire liquor store thing being open, there are lines with people standing in it to go into the liquor store. So you're trying to tell me that alcohol raises the chances of you actually getting COVID virus, or is it the fact that motherfuckers got to stand in line to go into the liquor store that raises the chances of you actually getting COVID virus? Like, think about this shit. Like, really do. Like, think about this shit. This type of shit that just blows my mind. Another good, lovely, stupid logic that we got going on now. When you walk into a restaurant, you have to wear your mask when you walk into the restaurant. However, before you got in a restaurant, you didn't have to wear a mask. You were walking around perfectly fine, bumping into everybody else around you in your area for all intents and purposes. Brushing up against the banker, the lawyer, the everybody, everybody else under the fucking sun in your local town or neighborhood for all intents and purposes. Didn't have to wear a mask then, but when you get to the restaurant, you have to wear a mask. Okay, cool. You walk into the restaurant with a mask on. You sit down at your table, you get to take the mask off. What is the fucking point of putting a fucking mask on to walk to a fucking table when I got a goofy ass bitch right behind me and a fucking seat behind me? How does that even work as fucking logic? Like, how is that even fucking logic? I'm walking into a restaurant and I'm going to sit down at a table. I'm sitting down at my table. Not only do I have to take off my mask, I got a goofy family behind me. I got a goofy family on the side of me. I got another goofy family on the other side of me. And this makes sense how? This makes sense how, people? There's really no social distancing in our fucking restaurant. Let's just keep it 100. Let's just keep it 100. Because at this rate, You're just pulling shit out of your ass at this rate. Let's just keep it 100. You're literally pulling shit out your ass. This is the problem that I have with this whole entire thing, because the inconsistencies of the bullshit, it's just the inconsistencies in general. Then my favorite one, well, the health department says, okay, shut the fuck up with the health department. All the health department there is to do is to collect fucking data. That's fucking it. They collect fucking data. That's all their fucking job really is to collect fucking data. Other job might be if you end up with TB, they'll pretty much write a script for you to go get an X-ray done. If not, then you're pretty much your hospital pretty much handle that any fucking way. So all intents purposes, their job is pretty much to collect data. Same with the CDC, data and vaccines, and what's trending ailment-wise. Like, no, dude, no. And the sad part about that is, another funny thing about the whole entire thing is we're supposed to listen to the CDC. Their job is to collect data on a worldwide scale. So they're basically the health department on a worldwide scale. They don't really do shit else besides collect data and tell you who gets the best hospitals, financial wise, shit like that, the rankings of the countries in their medical care, stuff like that, the data for, AIDS in each country, or, the life expectancy in each country. That's pretty much what they fucking do. That's all they fucking do, is collect data on the whole entire world, on the life expectancy of people, their medical care overall rankings, the fucking AIDS, who got AIDS, who don't got AIDS, the mortality of fucking babies in the whole entire world, shit like that, for all intents and purposes. That's pretty much what the CDC does. They collect data on a world scale. They're not really the authorities in anything besides collecting data internationally. That's about it. That's about fucking it. And that's typically how that works. And the sad part about that is, you want me to listen to people who collect data from my department that I work in. We pass it to the health department. The health department passes it to the CDC. The CDC passes it to the fucking World Health Organization. Like, think about that shit. Without my department, you wouldn't be getting any fucking information at all about any of these fucking diseases. Literally think about that shit. If the micro department didn't even fucking exist, there wouldn't be no information on any of this shit passed to them guys, unless you did serology in fucking chemistry area, or serology was its own little area outside chemistry. You wouldn't get any fucking data at all on this shit at all without a micro department. The same thing goes for doctors. A doctor wouldn't know what the fucking to prescribe for his fucking patient without running a Cincy test, which actually comes through micro. It comes from micro. Like, think about this shit. We pretty much isolate the shit. We put it on plates, then we put it in a Vitek or any other type of machine that you like using, and then we run sensitivities on it based on the antibiotics. We run various different antibiotics on it for sensitivities to see what it's susceptible to and see what it's resistant to. That right there gives the doctor the idea on what he can give his patient and what he can't give his patient for all intents and purposes. Without that, he wouldn't know what to fucking do with his fucking, he'd be sitting on his fucking thumbs and sticking his fucking thumbs up his ass. That's typically how that works. And the sad part about that is, the thing that blows my mind on this shit is, all these other places are trying to be like the it person for information and health on shit like this, when in fact, we're the ones who hand you the information. It's that simple. We're the ones that hand everybody this information so they can do what they need to do their jobs properly. But we want to sweep micro under the rug, like, well, you're just a microbiologist, or you're just this person. We're more important than you fucking think. We're the one who tests these things in each of our counties and districts and states to actually pass it out to people so they can have the fucking information. This is typically how this shit works. The sad part about this is, the shit that blows my mind about this the most is the fact that all this shit that they're coming up with logically makes no fucking sense when you actually apply it in public. That's the problem that I'm having with this shit. Like, you can't sit up here and tell me a person who works in microbiology, who worked in microbiology and who works in microbiology, that is perfectly fine to walk around. Because the sad part about this, these lovely masks that we're wearing, okay, cool. The sad part about that is these same masks that we wear are the same masks we wear if we're sick at work. So if you're sick, you have to put on this fucking mask. If you're a patient, you come into the hospital sick, you'll put on this fucking mask. Nobody else puts on a mask but your ass. A good example of that is if you work at a hospital and you work near patients and you don't get, or you work near coworkers, depending on how strict your fucking your supervisor is. If you don't get the flu shot at the hospital, you have to wear the fucking mask. It's not to protect you from them. It's to protect everybody else from you. The same fucking mask we walk around talking about is the greatest thing in the world, is to protect everybody else from your ass, from not getting the fucking flu shot. It's typically how that works. And the sad part about that is, the thing that bothers me about that is we're walking around with it like it actually protects you from anything else, when in fact it doesn't protect you from anything. It protects everybody else from your dumbass. That's typically how this shit works. So explain to me the logic in this shit and help me walk through this shit, because this shit makes no fucking sense to me on a grand scale. Because at the end of the day, if it was as bad as it was, it's kind of like the flu. If it was as bad as it was, we make motherfuckers stay home for a fucking week for the flu. So if you have the flu and we confirm that you had the flu, your ass can't come back to work for a fucking week. You got to stay your ass at home for a fucking week before you come back to work trying to infect everybody else. It's typically how that works. The sad part about that, if you have a cold or anything else, you just merely smack on a mask and you walk around and you pretty much do what you need to do in your fucking work area for all intents and purposes. And this is typically how this shit works. And the sad part about that is surgeons wear it like multiple people said, to basically keep from infecting the clean area, or the clean field for all intents and purposes. The clean field basically means the clean area in which you actually sterilize, so you can actually do this proper surgery in that area for all intents and purposes. So the area that you sterilize is the clean field. So to keep the clean field sterile, you basically wear a mask, so your spittle, nothing else, and anything else possibly can go into the clean field for all intents and purposes. That's typically how that works. And nobody touches the clean field unless it's a scalpel or somebody trying to, hold shit open with clamps or clasp, or little things that pry things open for all intents and purposes. It's typically how that works. Okay, cool. Back to the illogical, logical shit that we're actually applying in public. I've already said the restaurant thing. Think about that shit. The restaurant. The fucking restaurant. I can walk around outside the restaurant without a fucking mask on, bumping into every fucking baddie, known the fucking man in town, but I have to wear a mask the minute I want to turn around and turn left and walk into the restaurant. Think about that shit. Now, I just did all this shit. Now I just walked into the fucking restaurant. Now I'm sitting down at the table, and I don't have to wear a mask. Or I'm sitting down at the bar and I don't have to wear a mask. Like, think about this shit. So now, what's happening is everybody that came from outside, who was walking inside, to all the people wearing masks, are actually affecting everybody behind the fucking counter and who is serving them. Did you ever think of this dumb shit, you dumb fucks? Everybody that's walking from outside, who literally walked around with no mask on, who quite possibly can have the coronavirus, walks into the fucking establishment, sits down at a fucking table, or sits down at a fucking bar, and takes off their mask and orders stuff from the person wearing a fucking one-way mask. The one-way mask that's meant to keep everybody else at the bar from getting sick from that person. Sad part about that is everybody at the bar, they're not protected from everybody at the fucking bar with these fucking masks. Now, if you want to do that shit, that's where an N95, N99, or N100 comes into play. If you're going to be doing this shit for real. So, if you're really going to be doing this shit 100, I would suggest you get an N95, an N99, or an N100. It's just that simple. Like, because the sad part about that is, the thing that blows my mind about this whole entire thing logically is, you're trying to tell me that the person behind the bar or my server Wearing the fucking mask is safe from anybody who just walked in from outside, who probably got coughed on, spit on, walked into a sneeze cloud, a cough cloud, any fucking thing is safe from people that just walked in from all that bullshit from outside to inside to basically sit down at a table and get everybody fucking sick in the whole entire restaurant who's not wearing a mask and who is wearing a mask, because those masks aren't meant to protect the people who are wearing them. They're meant to protect the people who are not wearing them. So the person wearing that mask is only protecting the people who they're serving. The sad part about that is it doesn't work in reverse. So let's just say 10 people come to the fucking bar. They just happen to be at a protest. One of the quote unquote peaceful protests that conveniently, I didn't know peaceful protesting was like busting out windows, marching on mayor's houses, and trespassing. And somehow, some way, peaceful protesting. But we'll run with this shit. We'll run with this shit. Okay, cool. These motherfuckers come up in your establishment. One of these motherfuckers cough in your fucking face. They have coronavirus. Your ass is sick with that fucking mask on. It doesn't matter because it only filters. Those masks that you're wearing only filter shit coming from you. It doesn't filter any shit coming in from everybody else. That is the fucking problem that I'm having with your fucking logic that you're trying to apply in public. Okay, cool. Now I just named one scenario. A bunch of people from a protest. A couple of them got coronavirus from being out there doing their peaceful protesting, flipping cars, trespassing, breaking out windows, throwing mortar shells, firecrackers, fireworks, setting shit on fire, beating up the police. Peaceful protest. All cool. Peaceful protest. Yeah, right. They all decide that they're hungry and they want to walk in an establishment to get some fucking food. Now they've been walking around doing all this bullshit without mask on, and all of a sudden now they decide that they get hungry and they walk into an establishment. And when you get in, you got to walk into an establishment with a mask on. When you get into the establishment and sit at your chair, you no longer have to wear the mask. So now everybody around these people are fucking sick because they're eating. They're eating at the restaurant and making everybody else sick. Even the people who are wearing the mask are getting fucking sick. This is typically how this shit works. The masks are doing nothing but pretty much giving everybody a false sense of security. A very false sense of security. That's all it really is. You got these masks meant to actually keep people from getting sick from other people. These are the same masks. If you got the cold or the flu and you're actually on the job, you put on your fucking face so you don't get your other coworkers sick. That's typically how that works. This is typically how these masks all work. The problem I'm having with this shit is how you're trying to apply this logic to a fucking mask in public, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work in the least bit. Because you can't sit up here and tell me that one, alcohol higher your chances of getting COVID virus when you got a bunch of motherfuckers standing in line at a fucking wine and spirit store, right behind each other, one behind the other, standing in line at the wine and spirit store. Half them wearing masks, half them not wearing masks. Like, think about this shit. When they get in the store, they got to wear their mask. They walk around, shop for alcohol, get the fuck up out of there. Next person comes in the store. They're all standing in a fucking line, one right behind the other for all intents and purposes. And half of them are wearing a mask and half of them are not wearing a mask. And they're probably all coughing at each other, sneezing on each other, doing everything under the sun, high-fiving each other, shaking each other's hands. You name it. You just pass around a shit ton of fucking germs standing in line at the alcohol store. So it's not the alcohol that actually higher your chances of getting COVID virus. It's the fact that you got to stand in line outside the store next to a bunch of other dumb drunk motherfuckers that need their alcohol fixed, and they're standing in line and waiting to go in the wine and spirit store. That's typically how that works. Like, anybody not seeing this logic, anybody not seeing the illogic to this logic for all intents and purposes. Like, think about this shit. Okay, cool. Moving right along. Back to the restaurant scene. You mean to tell me that, yeah. Here's a good example of this shit. When restaurants were closed down and they were using their drive-through windows and shit like that, or their wide open windows where they can open them. Okay, cool. I walk up to the window. I ain't got to wear a mask because I'm at the window. Or, you ain't got to wear a mask because you're at the window for all intents and purposes. So what you're trying to tell me is that person's safe from anybody outside. That person working in the restaurant is safe from anybody outside the restaurant. That's basically the same thing as you walk in a restaurant, you sit down at a table after walking around outside without a mask on, and you sit down at a table and you affect the whole entire fucking restaurant. That's typically how this shit works. Maybe not the whole entire restaurant, but a good majority of that restaurant's probably going to get it for all intents and purposes. I'm willing to bet any money as far as germs is concerned, 15 to 20 feet that way, 15 to 20 feet that way, 15 to 20 feet that way, 15 to 20 feet that way. Somebody's going to get it. Anybody can get it for that at that point in time. Even the fucking waitress wearing a fucking mask is getting it. It doesn't matter. And the sad part about that is they use this fear-mongering shit to keep everybody scared from getting the COVID virus when, in fact, you're doing nothing more than stoking fear. When you stoke fear, people get stressed. When people get stressed, their immune system gets suppressed. When their immune system gets suppressed, more people get sick from any other thing and every other thing under the fucking sun. That's typically how this works. That's typically how this shit works. So all this bullshit that you're spewing makes no fucking sense logically. If you're a medical professional, so a medical professional is like, oh, okay, well, that don't make any fucking sense. Especially if you work in a fucking lab. Like, think about this shit. Now, don't get me wrong. I've worked in some. When you work in a lab, or if you work in a hospital or a lab, the hospital or lab is cold for a fucking reason. It's cold to keep the germs from thriving on any surface whatsoever, for all intents and purposes. That's the reason why the hospitals are usually cold, and that's the reason why the labs are cold. So they can keep shit from thriving, germs and bacteria and all that shit from thriving on any surface or in the air, for all intents and purposes. Now, I will say this, because a lot of hospitals made this stupid decision by turning up the fucking heat because somebody got cold. Usually it's a woman. Somebody got cold. Now, I have worked in hospitals where the lab is hot as hell, and you wonder why everybody's fucking sick all the time on your fucking staff. Because you're allowing germs to fucking grow and multiply at a rapid rate. That's why. That's why, people. You can't sit up here and have a hot-ass lab and expect everything to go perfectly, swimmingly. That's typically how that works. You got to keep it chill so you can keep all the germs and bacteria and viruses on chill. That's typically how this shit works. So sitting up in a hot ass place is not going to negate a fucking virus for all intents and purposes. It's probably going to thrive. And it's probably going to get worse. Don't get me wrong. Now, if it's over a certain temperature, that's a whole nother story. But if it's above room temperature, you're pretty much SOL when it comes to germs. If it's room temperature, if anywhere in the room temperature range, you're SOL. If it's below room temperature, you're pretty much fine. If it's well above room temperature, where like you can heat up your body to a point where like you pretty much got to temp, you got to take your ass to the hospital. Then you'll probably be okay, depending on what the germ and the bacteria is, depending on its life cycle and its resistance and its potency for all intents and purposes for let me rephrase that. It's resilience for all intents and purposes during changes in environment, temperature changes in environment. Depends on the germs, because some can actually outlast hot ass weather or hot ass temperatures. Then others could pretty much would die after it raises over like 98.7 or something like that. If it goes over 90.8.7, it's pretty much a wrap for that. However, room temperature is below body temperature, which makes it kind of hard. Room temperature is about what, like 60, 65 or, 74, 76, maybe 70, between 70, it's like 70 something, I would say about 70 something degrees. Fahrenheit, for all intents and purposes, is room temperature. Somewhere in that area. It's either 76 or 75. I could be wrong. Let me look it up. Um, Room temperature is about 68 to 72. I was right the first time when I was actually saying 68 to 72 degrees for all intents and purposes, room temperature. Fahrenheit, 68 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit is room temperature, and 20 to 22 degrees Celsius for all intents and purposes for his room temperature in Celsius. But the sad part about that is I'm still trying to figure out where the hell and why the hell we're doing a lot of the stupid shit that we're doing and trying to explain it away with, all these organizations that basically are there to collect data. That's all they fucking do is collect data. The CDC is probably the only place that does vaccines, and they pretty much collect data either way. They do vaccines and collect data. So at the end of the day, it's pretty much is what it is. Like, you're basically telling me to rely on somebody who collects data all day from a department that I work in. Let that shit sink in. You're collecting data from a department that I work in. That'd be no different than a doctor trying to figure out what antibiotic is resistant or what antibiotics the germ or the bacteria is resistant to or susceptible to. You're basically doing the same fucking thing. You're just collecting data, only the doctor's collecting data so he can actually treat the patient. You're collecting data so you can actually say, this is bad. He's collecting data so he can actually treat a patient, which makes him better than you, or him or her better than you for all intents and purposes. It's typically how I feel about a lot of this shit. But I digress. Y'all have a good one. And that's my rant for this week on COVID and logic. COVID versus logic. Peace.